What's up, HUSNG.com? My name is Michael, known online as Fedor_8, and today I'm going to be showing you some matches that I've played against a reg at the $30 Hyper Turbo HUSNGs. So take you behind the scenes and show you how I approach this particular reg. I blocked the name so you don't know necessarily who it is, but you know that it's a reg at the $30 level. And basically, I want to show you how I approach an opponent with reads. So it's not going to be as standard as playing against someone readless and making decisions based on population tendencies, but more based on this particular opponent's tendencies and how I feel he plays and how I adjusted my game based on that. So I know a lot of you like to watch how people adjust their game and what reads they use and how they change their standard game based on reads. So I want to show you that today. So again, this is with reads, and the reads that I have on this particular opponent is that he's very aggressive. So I have a note that says aggro. I have a note that says triple barrels. So I'm assuming that when I wrote that, it means he likes to triple barrel bluff, which makes sense if he's aggressive. And he folds a lot to c-bets. So those are the reads I have on this particular opponent. Now you can also see the stats that are up on the screen here. My notes were taken at the beginning of when I first started playing this player, so as I started playing him more, the statistics might have changed a little bit, but regardless, those are the notes I have for now, so I'm going to follow them because I feel that if I wrote them down, I'm pretty confident that I wrote them for a reason. But either way, I have Coffee HUD up here that show basically how this player plays. So you can see that in the small blind, he's min-raising quite a bit of hands here early on. Same thing out of position, has a high VPIP early on as well. And he's aggro, as you can see. He continuation bets nearly 7%, all his barrels the turn, and that's why I wrote he likes to triple barrel as well by betting the river. And limped pots too, as you can see, he's very aggressive here. Hundreds across the board. Out of position, he folds a lot in limped pots, right? And when he calls, he folds a lot to barrels. And same thing versus c-bets, folds to c-bets quite a bit too. So I'm going to go ahead and use that and approach this reg with those reads, and we'll see how these matches go. So I played these matches about a week ago. Actually, way more than that. I played them about a month ago. So these are our matches played about a month ago. So I'm going to use this as a self-review to play against this, when playing against this particular reg, and also give you some insight as to what I do and why I did it. So let's take a look. So I have 7-4 the first hand. I like to limp in hyper turbos. So this goes beyond. Sorry about that. So this goes beyond just my strategy versus recreational players. So I do like to also have a limping range versus regs, especially against someone who's not necessarily attacking my limps all too much. As we can see here, he's not one to attack my limps early on. So instead of folding trash like 7-4, I'll go ahead and limp, especially, and I think it's very important, that he folds a lot in limped pots, right? So why would I fold some of trash hands if I know that, number one, when I limp in, he doesn't attack my limps, so I usually get to see a free flop, and number two, when I miss, I can take it down with a small continuation bet in a limped pot because he's so tight in limp pots. So I think that really plays towards me limping in a lot more than I should or would if this opponent obviously wouldn't fold on the flop or would be very aggro out of the big blind. So all to say, 7-4, I'll go ahead and limp in here and see a flop. My opponent checks, and we see a flop. So the flop is King 6-8 rainbow. I have a gut shot, and my opponent checks. So as usual, like I said, I'm going to go take a stab here, and it really doesn't have to be much bigger than a min bet here. I think that'll accomplish exactly what we wanted to, and we're not risking more chips than we need to. So you don't have to go ahead and make a pot size bet here. You don't have to bet 30. I think 20 will accomplish the same thing, and you're risking less chips. So it's a better decision in my opinion. So I go ahead and min bet 20 here, and my opponent folds. So it kind of holds true as to what I was saying based on my reads, that he doesn't attack my limps and he's pretty tight. in the big blind in limped pots. So a lot of the times it's going to go limp. We're going to see a flop. He's going to check. I'm going to bet, and he's going to fold. And that's pretty standard. I think a lot of people are too tight in limped pots. So I think that's something a lot of you guys can use to your advantage, because instead of just folding some trash hands, just go ahead and limp and try to keep the pot small and play post flop. Especially when you know your opponent is a lot of time just check folding the flops. Now, obviously, this comes with reads. If you have no reads, or if your opponent doesn't play that style, then there's really no reason to limp in and bet when your opponent's not folding the flop. So we pick up 3-4 the very next hand, and my opponent raises, and I just fold. Not necessarily willing to play super trash against a recreational player who I feel I have a better edge against post flop. I might call there, but against a stronger player, I'm just going to fold a hand like 3-4. So the next hand is King Jack. I decide to make a pre-flop raise here. I think my hand is pretty strong, obviously, with King Jack. Just make a min raise, and my opponent calls. So we don't get the greatest flop of all time. We have 2 overcards and a gut shot, but there are 3 clubs out there, and unfortunately we don't have a club. Just knowing that my opponent likes to fold to continuation bets, I feel that I can get a good read as to where he stands in this pot when he checks here. If I just go ahead and throw out a C bet, I think he's going to fold all his air on this board, a lot of air that have no clubs, because it's not really a full floatable flop if you don't have a club in your hand. So if he has a hand like, even if he has like a queen 3 with no club, he's just going to go ahead and fold, because it's really not a floatable flop if you don't have a draw. And I think also if he just check calls with a weak pair, I feel that number one, I have some overcards, a gut shot, and I feel that I could take this pot away from him later on if he's playing it passively, right? So if he just check calls, I can usually see that as weakness, and depending on the opponent and depending on their style, I can usually take it away from them later. So I'm going to go ahead and throw out a continuation bet. I think it's the best chance for me to win this pot if I do so on the flop. And obviously I'm going to go ahead and follow my read that he likes to fold to C bets. So I make continuation bet and he folds. So I take it down once again. So the next hand, I get King Deuce out of position. My opponent raises, and I call with King High. We had a great flop. Obviously, we flop top pair. But again, we have a very weak kicker. And knowing that my opponent is aggressive, this is a hand that I'm going to want to try to small ball a little bit. Yes, I have top pair, but my kicker is really poor. And if I'm playing an aggressive opponent who's going to be raising me or betting into me, it's not really a hand that I want to be betting and calling a raise with, or betting and shoving to a raise. It's kind of a hand that I'm very happy with. I have top pair, but it is still a very tough spot against an aggressive opponent. So I think the best way to play this hand is to check the flop and let our opponent dictate the action, right? We have a read on him that he's aggressive. He likes to bet. He likes to barrel. We saw his continuation bet percentage is really high. So I'm just going to go ahead and check and call if he bets. So he goes ahead and makes a standard continuation bet. At this point, I'm just going to call. Again, it's not really a spot where I want to put a raise in, because if he shoves, it's not the easiest call to make, right? Because I have top pair, but my kicker is very poor. And especially since I know that he's going to barrel the turn and potentially barrel the river too, I think I could get multiple streets of value by playing it much safer by just check calling. So that's what I go ahead and do, I think, here. Yeah, I just go ahead and I check and call. So I get an amazing turn card, and a lot of people might say, okay, so lead out now that you picked up 3 of a kind. You made a hand, you're really happy with it now. Obviously, you're going to go broke with this hand even if he has you beat, so why don't you bet? And the reasoning for that is because, number one, I feel that I have to follow my reads, right? We know he's aggressive. We know he's going to barrel a lot of turns and potentially a lot of rivers. And I feel that in order to play into that mentality, you have to let him hang himself. So if I lead out here, we're going to kill his aggression factor. We're going to kill his aggression, right? He might fold air if I lead out, whereas he might bluff that air if I check, right? And if he has some weak marginal value, he might just call, right? He might not raise. And then on the river, he might not call if he has like a weak pair here, or if he has just an ace high. He just might call one street and fold. Same thing with a draw. He might just call with his draw and take my aggression as a way of slowing down. So I don't want to give him any reason to slow down here. I'm just going to go ahead and check again and show weakness, show that I have maybe a weak pair, maybe a pair of fours, maybe I have a draw, like a queen 10 or even a 9-10 kind of hand. So I'll give him the opportunity to hang himself here with his bluffs, and knowing that he's aggressive, I'm going to I'm going to let this play be dictated by his aggression. So he checks back the turn. So it's obviously not what I wanted to see, because at that point I expected him to barrel with a lot of his air. So it's kind of making me feel that he has some marginal showdown value when he checks there. Maybe as a pair of fours, maybe as a weak jack or an ace high hand. Just some marginal showdown value, because I feel that if he had a complete bluff, I think he would barrel. So all to say that obviously not happy to see his check, and we get to see a river card. So at this point, the river card actually really helps us, because now not only did a pair of fours improve, but our hand refilled up as well. So in the odd chance that he had a boat on the turn, we also made a boat on the river. And it's important to try to figure out what he has. So like I said, I feel like he has some marginal showdown value in this spot, and he might have improved a 4. If he has a jack, I don't think he's going to be folding that either. Maybe an ace high will get some action as well, whether they're going to call a bet or bet if checked. And in this spot, I also think obviously he has some air in his range as well. I'm not actually a fan of the fact that if he had air, he checked the turn. It's not the greatest bluff card either. If I call on the flop, it's not necessarily scaring me away. So that might be another reason why he decided to shut down his bluffs on the turn. So again, he's a reg, right? He's not a recreational player that'll just have pure aggression with no thought process behind it. He is a thinking player. He is successful as well. So you have to think outside of the box a little bit against him. So like I said, maybe on the turn, the king made him slow down with his bluffs as well, because it's not necessarily a spot where he feels I'll be folding anything that I called with on the flop. Whereas maybe a recreational player would just barrel, because like, oh, he just check called on the flop, he can't have too much, I'm going to barrel the turn. Especially since a king paired, he won't necessarily have a king here. Maybe I could get him to fold a 4. So that's the difference between the two thought processes that one player can have compared to the other. So on the river, I need to make a decision as to, am I going to make a bet here, or am I going to check? Obviously, we're not worried about the strength of our hand at this point. And the decision to check or to bet for value really comes down to what we think our opponent has, what his range is, and what he's going to do in this spot. So if we think about how we played this hand, we played this hand very passively, right? We just check called the flop, so we didn't show any strength on the flop. We just checked the turn and he checked back. And how will he react to another check on the river, right? Or how will he react to us betting out the river? So those are a few questions we need to ask ourselves. And at this point, if I lead out the river, right, what could he call me with? So I think he'll call me with it. He needs to have some kind of marginal value, like maybe an ace high we'll call, maybe a pair of jacks we'll call. The 4x will probably get it in. And the rest is going to be all his misdraws or his random bluffs that we're just going to fold to a bluff here. Sorry, not a bluff, a bet here. So the other option, obviously, other than betting, is to check. Now, what can I get value out of if I check? I still think I'm going to get the same value out of an ace high, because I see him betting an ace high here. I see him still betting his jack for value here. And obviously he's going to be betting his 4. But he's also going to be bluffing draws since he's aggressive. I don't see him shutting down with no showdown value. I see him bluffing draws, and I see him bluffing complete air too. So when I look at it that way, I kind of get an impression that there's more hands that are going to be betting this river and opening the door for me if I check than the number of hands that are going to be calling and if I bet, right? And you also can't forget the fact that he might overbet shove here with bluffs, because he might be like, okay, I might have ace high as well. I might have weak showdown value as well. Am I going to be ready to call a shove on this board? So it might be a spot where he overbet shoves, hoping I fold out marginal value and say, okay, he's only going to call me with the nuts. And based on how he played it, it's unlikely I have the nuts based on how I played this hand. So all to say is that I went ahead and checked the turn, checked the river here. So I check the river and I leave the door open for him to either make a small value bet where he might bet fold. So yes, he might fold if after he bets and I raise, but it's the same thing as if I bet and he calls and the action ends there. So I get the same value whether I bet and he calls, or if I check, he bets, I shove and he folds. But again, I want to get that extra value out of these weak hands or these bluffs that won't call a river lead. So I go ahead and check and I hope that he bets, and he does. So he makes a small bet and a weird sizing, 59. So not even half the pot, a very small bet and a weird looking bet too. So at this point, there's not much of a decision for me to make. I know I'm raising, I just need to decide how much. And the fact that he made a small bet like this and not a nice, confident bet makes me think he's actually strong, right? Because he doesn't want me to fold by making a small bet. I feel like if he was bluffing here, he would either go ahead and make a standard half pot size bet, 80, 100 maybe, or even make it a little bigger, like 120, to try to push me away. Or like I said, he even might overshove. But when he goes ahead and make a small sizing like 59 into 160, I kind of see value here. Now, whether that value is 4x or that value is 2 pair jacks and kings, and he's trying to get value from like an ace high or something like that, I think he's looking for value here. So now I need to decide how much I'm going to raise, whether I'm going to shove or if I'm going to make a small raise. So I decide to just shove because, like I said, that looks like value to me, and I don't want to make a small, like a min raise or a small raise where he just calls with his 4x and ends the action. So I just go ahead and overshove, and I say any decent value will probably call, especially since I play this hand so passively, right? There's just no action, and he might also be thinking along the lines of that he might have induced a bluff with the small sizing, because if you think of how I play this hand, just check call, check check, check on the river as well. And now he might look at this like, okay, his hand doesn't make any sense. And usually when your hand doesn't make sense, regs assume you're bluffing, right? When it doesn't make any sense, it's usually a bluff. So my hand doesn't make any sense how I played it. His bet sizing looks small and weak, so he's like, maybe he was shutting down and now he saw this sizing and he decided to bluff. That might go through his head as well. So all to say, I think the better decision is to shove instead of to make a mini raise, and I hope to get called here. And he calls, so pretty happy. I'm curious to see what he has. And he had Jack 4, so he did have 4x here. He did have me on the flop, and the turn card, as we said, might slow him down, right, if he has some showdown value. And that's what he actually had here. He didn't have a bluff that shut down on the turn. He had some showdown value that said, okay, my strength, the strength of my hand is no longer what it was on the flop. Let me slow down here. And then unfortunately for him, and fortunately for us, the river was exactly what we wanted, right? Because it re-gave him the strength that he had on the flop. And now he's just in a spot where he's not folding, and we're stacking him. So obviously this hand ended up playing itself to some degree, just because, I mean, a lot of people, that's what a lot of people will say, like, oh, this hand played itself because it was full house on full house. Yes, however, maybe it wouldn't have played itself if we didn't play it the way we did, right? If we would have check raised the flop, we would have got it in, and we would have got it in, we would have got it in behind, right? If we lead out the turn, yes, we would probably get called, and then the river card obviously lets him get it in because he improves as well. But I think obviously the way we played it was a little different, and I think that really stems from the fact that we're playing a regular and we're not playing a recreational player, and that really matters when you're making a decision and deciding how to play hands. So so that's the hand, and we take it down, and that's the match. So I hope you enjoyed. This is one match against a regular at the $30 hypers with reads, and that's it. So just keep in mind, when you're playing regs, you want to play differently than when you're playing recreational. You can't just play the same style and expect it to work. Some players play very well against recreational players and play very poorly against regulars because they don't adjust. And some people are very good against regulars and are very good against really good players because they think and outsmart them, but then are not good against bad players because they're not able to adjust to the bad player and play a different style, because some styles are obviously better than others. So if your player is not thinking on a certain level, you want to be able to stoop down your thinking so that it matches his thinking. Because everything you do, every decision you make, and every play you make, you want it to be perceived by your opponent in a certain way. So if your opponent is looking at something in one way, but you're thinking of it in another, then you might not get your point across, and you might not get your opponent to do what you want him to do. So again, it's important to understand who you're playing. If you have reads, then follow them. All right. If you have a read that a guy triple barrel bluffs a lot, you have marginal value on the river, and he bet the flop, bet the turn, and he bet the river, and you're very confident or fairly confident that yes, your hand's very weak, you only beat a bluff, but you know he triple barrel bluffs a lot, then follow it. All right. I've seen way too many students who have great reads, play great poker, but just don't follow their reads enough, and it really has an impact on their bottom line. So use reads. All to say, use reads, play differently against recreationals than you do against regulars, and the other way around as well. And just make sure every decision has a reason behind it, and you'll do well. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it was a short hand history here against one particular opponent, but I think it shows a pretty interesting hand and how things were played a little differently than usual. So guys, again, my name is Michael, Fedor_8. I hope you enjoyed, and I wish you all the best of luck. Take care, guys.